And we're live! Hello, people! Thank you for joining this little talk, presentation, demo, whatever you want to call it. I'm here today with my good friend Lorena, who is going to help me out taking questions from the audience. But let's back up to the beginning. This is portfolio talk and review, making art that is not for clients. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. And before I start, I just wanted to say these are all just my opinions and experiences. I'm not an expert. I'm just telling you what I think and what I've observed. So just take everything with a grain of salt and still be critical and decide whether my advice is for you or not. So about questions. Yesterday during the stream, we got a ton of questions and it was way too much to answer. And we ended up just going along with our plan and talking about the stuff we had planned. But today we'll see if we can get a couple of questions in between stuff that I'm talking about. But please, if you ask questions, try to address something that I'm talking about at the moment. So if your question is relevant to the topic that we're discussing right now, feel free to ask it. But if not, maybe in the end we can get to it. So yeah, I have not let Lorena talk, so I'll just let you introduce yourself real quick.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lorena. I'm here to take your questions. I'm just helping out. Jamila is paying me with friendship, I guess. I'm kidding.
Friendship points.
Friendship points. If you have any questions, I'll be reading the chat. And if your question fits, I will throw it in there and interrupt Jamila for you. So yeah, let's go.
Yay, thank you. So I see in the very beginning, somebody asked, will this be recorded or uploaded? And will the talk from yesterday be uploaded? It's all on YouTube. It's all on my channel, Jamila Knopf. YouTube.com/Jamila Knopf. So that's where you can find it. But now let's get into it. I put a lot of work into this. I have like a proper presentation and everything. So I hope you're going to enjoy this and I hope you're going to get something out of it. So let's talk about portfolios. How do you do this thing? Like if you don't want to work for clients, what makes a good portfolio if nobody's there to tell you, yeah, you can work for me or you cannot work for me? So this is kind of an overview of what you can expect from this talk. First, I want to talk about what an illustration portfolio is or what a portfolio is. Secondly, I want to address some challenges of personal art. And as a third thing, I want to talk about what makes a good portfolio, again, in my opinion. And the last thing I want to do is address some portfolios I selected before this, and I'm going to give little critiques and do a couple of overpaints. I hope I can get this done within the time frame I set for myself. I'm aiming for 1.5 hours, we'll see. But that's pretty much what I want to do today. So let's jump in. What is an illustration portfolio? So the magic number I've always heard was around 12 pieces of your best finished work. It's basically like your highlight reel. And the key here, I think, is quality over quantity. Even if you don't have those 12 pieces yet, I think it's a good idea to just aim lower, really only put those pieces in that you think are good, that are up to your standards. And what you see on the right here is just like a little sample from my current portfolio. So some people ask, like, what about social media? Social media is not your portfolio. Social media is, I think, a little bit more about quantity. It's nice to get content out on a regular basis. You have like more works in progress, sketches. You might share more personal stories and all that on there, which has nothing to do with your portfolio and which shouldn't be in your portfolio. So that was that. And with creating personal art and a portfolio full of personal art come a lot of challenges. So let's look at those. The number one piece of advice I always hear when you're talking about portfolios is you think about your client that you want to work for. So let's say you want to work for Magic the Gathering. So what do? You tailor your work towards the company you want to work for. So that means you paint images that have the format and the subject matter and the kind of look that fits into that brand or that IP, like Magic. But that does not apply here if you wanna create a portfolio with your personal work. So yeah, there is no art director. You don't get any feedback from like a higher authority, in quotation marks. There's only feedback you get from your peers and from people who like your work. And you also get no brief. So there's no description of saying like, hey, paint a wizard with like magical spells around him. It's just like you have the freedom to paint anything. And that can be frightening sometimes.
Would you say that ArtStation is a portfolio or like more social media?
That's a tricky one. I think ArtStation is one of the sites that is closer to being a portfolio. But I still would say that there's more stuff in there that fills it up rather than just being like a condensed portfolio. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's like a in-between thing as well, which probably has to do with it still being a site where you can comment on the artwork, which gives it like the more deviant art / social media kind of vibe. So yeah, I prefer like having an actual portfolio site, but
Yeah.
that's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's an alternative if you have nothing else on hand. ArtStation can be nice, and they offer like a portfolio option as well, where you don't have to put your whole profile in there, I think. But yeah, having it on your website allows you to really present it in the way that you want to present it and all that. And I'm going to get to that later. I'm going to be talking about presentation, all that. So yeah, now the big question is, how do you make a solid illustration portfolio that is just for you or that allows you to make a living as an independent artist? Because that's what we were talking about yesterday, just having that personal work in there. And I would say, you like my little emojis.
It's so you. It's so you.
I know. I personally think it's a good idea to think of yourself as the client. So ask yourself, what do you want to see and what do you care about? So that leads you on the path to selecting what kind of work you want to make and put into your portfolio.
Another question about portfolios. If one has a complete project of more than these 10 to 15 illustrations, for example, 30 drawings, how would you present it on your website? Only choose only chosen work or everything on a dedicated subpage?
Ooh, you could do both. You could pick the best pieces and put them in a portfolio, like as your home page or your starting page. And then you can also have a separate tab where you have your project presented with a little description and all that. But I wouldn't feel forced to include everything in the portfolio just because it belongs together. I would always be checking and seeing what pieces kind of fall flat compared to others and that you can take them out and adjust things. So it's like an ongoing process. It's never really final or finished. It keeps changing, and you create new work, and then some older work doesn't quite measure up to it. So that's what I would say about that. If you want to figure out what to put in your portfolio, I think a really important thing is don't try to guess what people are into or what could be cool and make you popular. So like, all these people on ArtStation are painting like cool robot ladies or whatever, and just try to replicate that. That really doesn't work that well, I think. It's more about your own preferences and what you think is something that you care about. So yeah, instead ask yourself what you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be new or innovative. It just has to come from a genuine place of interest. I think that is the key element, and that's where people often run into trouble. They think, oh, the thing that I'm interested in couldn't possibly be interesting to other people, or like nobody cares about the stuff that I care about. That's definitely not true. There are so many people out there, and especially on the internet, there's like a niche for anything. Of course they care. There are people who share the same interests as you. And if your passion is showing in the work, and if your technical skill is sufficient enough, there will be an audience for your work. So you don't have to try and make or create something to please other people or to guess what would be well received. And that sounds pretty serious, like what you're passionate about and all that. And I think one key thing I always mention is establishing an emotional connection with the audience through your work. And that sounds so serious as well. And it doesn't have to be. Like, for example, if you like funny and cartoony work, you will be able to connect with people who share that same sense of humor as you. And that's also an emotional connection. It doesn't have to be like heavy or deep.
One question, like there are a couple of questions.
Okay, go for it.
One of them is the fan art question, fan art in a portfolio. And the other one is, does a portfolio have to include only original pieces? That was a fan art question. Sorry, that is it's going too fast again. Okay, here it is.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
If I have multiple interests I'm equally passionate about, like creature design and comics, how do I figure out what to focus on? So those were the questions that I...
Yeah, I would just say for the second question, you can focus on both those things, but I would put them in separate portfolios. I would just like kind of look at the work and see if it fits together, if it makes a nice cohesive body of work. And if there's like a disconnect between them, I would separate them into different pages probably. So that's something I'm going to be talking about later as well, like splitting your portfolio. And then about fan art, I think fan art can be great if you want to not make money off of your work necessarily. So if you just really do this for yourself and you're not planning on selling prints or anything, you can create as much fan art as you want. Just like put it in your portfolio, show it to people. But then once you take that step further and figure out like, hey, do I want to sell prints of this? It can be a big, big problem if you have fan art in there. And but also, if you actually want client work, I think fan art can be a nice way to attract clients. We've heard of Marvel artists who just started out drawing their favorite characters and superheroes, and then Marvel hired them based on that. So that can happen too, but just always keep that copyright and IP thing in mind if you create fan art and if you're planning on monetizing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I asked permission.
Yeah, you can do that if you get permission. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've been talking about like finding out what you're passionate about and all that, but yeah, what if I don't know yet what quote unquote my thing is? And there are some things that you can do to help you with that. I have talked about this in more detail at last year's talk or panel. No, it wasn't a panel. It was just a talk at Lightbox, and it is on YouTube. So if you Google Lightbox Expo and my name, that talk from last year should pop up, and there's much more detail about that. But just for now, I'd say ask others. That's like a good thing. Just ask them what recurring themes do they see in your finished work and in your sketchbooks. That's important. And just like ask them what adjectives come to their mind that describe your work. And don't let them say something like good or bad or whatever. Just kind of try going for words that capture the vibe of the work. So it could be bold and dynamic and action-packed or whatever. And that kind of gives you a direction of what you're actually doing that you might not be aware of. Another thing you can do is make an influence map, or just like list your influences and make a mood board, things like that. So Lorena's a big fan of that. So yeah, just like list or visualize things or people that influence you. That can be artists, music, places, movies, anything really. And lastly, I would say make your own list of adjectives. Think about what do you want your work to feel like and what vibe are you trying to capture with your work. And if you say, oh, I don't want to be boxed in, that's not free, I don't like it. Nothing is set in stone. You can always change that. It's always in flux. Things will be changing. So this is just a starting point that you're starting out with. You will eventually branch out, try new things and experiment and become interested in different subject matters. And that is fine. So, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. No, I would just throw in another question.
Yeah, in a second, I'll just go
go
over my examples because
I thought you were like done with the point.
Because I mentioned this influence map, that is an example I did last year for my own work. It includes like anime, nature, forests, artists I like, some magic in there. And the funny thing is I was looking at this when I prepared this presentation and I thought, oh, if I were to do this again today, it would be different already. So that's the thing I was talking about with it being not set in stone. And recurring themes in my work, I think I like telling stories. My paintings have a kind of a slice of life feel to them. I enjoy finding magic in the ordinary. I enjoy nature. I like painting female characters predominantly, and descriptive adjectives that might fit my work are magical, nostalgic, calm, lush, bright, and colorful. They might not always be there in every single piece, but that's kind of the overall vibe I'm going for. And I think this sort of thing is very, very helpful in figuring out a direction or just describing the work you already have. Okay, now I'm ready to take a question.
Yeah, it was a question. I don't know where it is anymore, but it was a question about putting like artwork from your IP into your portfolio, and or are you like, or would it be an issue with like stealing, like someone seeing it and taking it without permission, like your idea? I think you don't have to worry about that, but okay, I'm just gonna shut up.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, that's the issue of putting images on the internet, like all together, right? As
Yeah.
soon as you put it out there, there is the chance that somebody thinks, "Oh, is this mine now? Thank you,"
Yeah.
and just like takes it. So, no, I wouldn't worry about that. I would just like put it in your portfolio, and if you encounter that case, you might have to take legal action and all that, which is really annoying, but it happens. But if you let yourself, or if you keep yourself from creating something and putting it out there because you're afraid that somebody might take it, that is just very counterproductive, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Now, what makes a good portfolio? That is the big question. So let's see. Again, just my opinion. Don't have to believe me. I just am telling you what I think is right. So for me, the key ingredients are consistency and memorability. I think there's great value in being able to immediately identify a person's work just by looking at it. Just like then a new piece comes out, you look at it, you don't even have to see the username, you're like, oh yeah, that's XYZ's work. And I think that is great. So when the body of work feels like a whole, and you can tell it was created by the same person, it becomes much easier to relate to it and to immerse yourself in it. I think that's the big plus that this concept gives you and your emerging fan base. It gives you an advantage in a world that is oversaturated with images and in which people have short attention spans. So you can hold people's attention a bit longer if you have a couple of pieces that seem to belong together, not necessarily in an ongoing project or something, just that they feel like a whole, what your portfolio is basically. And that consistency and memorability, I think, is established by the way the artist chooses their subject and by the way the artist chooses to present those subjects. So basically, like, what are you showing and how are you showing it? So that is easier said than done. But how? How do you do that? And a little trick I found really useful is working serially. So I recommend working in smaller series that are cohesive within themselves. Doesn't have to be a huge project, doesn't have to be your IP, your book with like 100 illustrations. I've come to enjoy just like creating 3 pieces that belong together of roughly the same character and surroundings, or whatever you want. Like, you can just immerse yourself a little bit more in that one theme rather than jumping around between drastically different scenes all the time. Just like by creating a couple of pieces that belong together, there's this cohesiveness that is established right away. And you have similar color palettes here, you have that same character, and you have this sort of seaside vibe that is going on. And I think rather than having a single odd piece, if you create at least 2 more in a similar vein, it makes it easier for people to establish a connection again. So if your usual medium is digital, and then you create 1 ink piece and you want to put it in your portfolio, it looks a little bit weird because it's just not matching with the rest of them. But as soon as you start exploring that medium a bit more, and you create a couple of more pieces that might go with that 1 piece, it becomes something else. It becomes this little like sub-portfolio almost that you can put together.
Yeah, I really like this. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good idea. Good advice.
Thank you.
No,
I'm
seriously,
glad.
I like it.
So yeah, I think breaking up your portfolio into smaller collections can be a good alternative if you enjoy jumping between different styles and media. And I wrote down humans love looking for patterns, and I think that's part of it. If you're browsing someone's portfolio and there's just like one thing that stands out and that is not found anywhere else, it's just like a little bit jarring. But we like being able to find recurring themes and patterns and things, and that is no exception for your portfolio.
Yes.
Yeah. So also to add to that, which kind of goes a little bit with the question we had earlier, but this is a little bit more extreme. If you work in drastically different styles and genres, for example, you have like whimsical storybook illustrations and then very gory work, you might consider making separate portfolios and even separate websites for them, because it's this thing of like people expect a certain thing from you, and just putting these two things side by side probably wouldn't work that well. So just like separating them onto different pages, I think is a good idea.
Yes.
So if you have absolutely no idea what you want to paint, if you've never thought about creating a series or anything like that, here are a couple of prompts or ideas for series that are pretty open, a little bit abstract, very loose. So again, just like a little idea, don't have to follow through on it, but you could paint a series of scenes or illustrations inspired by different phobias. I think that's a nice idea. Seasons, flowers, or any plants you want, sweets, or really anything that sparks your imagination. I think there's something to be said about starting out with a more abstract thing, like a phobia, and then seeing what you come up with through word association and all that, and you immediately have different things to start out with. So with seasons, you have 4 illustrations immediately if you do this. I think that's something that you can do if you're stuck.
Yes.
Or classics, always like explore or reimagine a classic fairy tale or myth or legend. Good thing about fairy tales is also they are not copyrighted anymore. So since they're so old, you could just like illustrate Snow White pieces and no copyright lawyer would come after you, which is great.
Yeah.
Gotta get some breath here. I'm forgetting to breathe.
Oh, good. Breathe.
All right. So the portfolio experience. That is something that comes into play very much when we're talking about presentation. So when you put it on your website, just ask yourself, how does it flow? Does it feel harmonious or cohesive? How have you arranged the images? If you look at them side by side, is there something that seems to be standing out, something that doesn't quite live up to the other pieces, maybe in terms of quality or, I don't know, just level of finish, all these things, like how does it work together, not just a single piece in isolation. And then I think, yeah, it's important to ask yourself, does it strike a balance between variety and recurring themes? So I do have these recurring themes that I talked about earlier, lots of female characters. I do like the color blue, I like the color green, all that. You won't find a ton of red in my work. But I do try to include different places, characters, color palettes, lighting scenarios, compositions, viewpoints, poses, etc., etc. So even though most of the characters I paint are young girls, I try to vary them up a bit. So, presentation, we've already hinted at that. And I think there are some portfolio services out there, like ArtStation offers one, though I've never actually used that one. to be honest, so I can't comment on it. My go-to is always using my own website, or I encourage people to use their own website. And I think it's a good idea to keep the design minimal with a neutral background. And the most important thing is to highlight the art, not to distract from it. There's nothing I find more annoying when I'm looking at a portfolio than just one of these flashy websites that have stuff flying around and then animations and I don't know, spinning images. It's just so distracting and jarring and not very nice to look at. So I would just keep it all minimal.
Yeah, people are asking if you should get yourself a domain name and how to make your own website. There are lots of different options there. So I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Oh God, there are so many options. My go-to is always Squarespace. You're using Squarespace too. I just think they have a nice drag and drop functionality built into them. They have nice templates. Their designs are good to begin with. You don't need to do much of the heavy lifting yourself. It's just all there pretty much. You can tweak some fonts and colors, but that's about it. So yeah, I can recommend Squarespace, but this is not sponsored.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Hashtag not sponsored. Yeah. And I just looked at the time. We're doing very well on time because I'm rushing through this. So
Breathe.
yeah,
Breathe.
feel free to throw more questions in.
We can also just do a Q&A at the end.
Yes, we could do that.
Because I think since people don't exactly know what you're going to talk about, there's a lot of questions that you're already covering anyway. So
that is very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Okay, I have shown you like a little sample of my portfolio already. I personally use a square grid because my paintings have like horizontal and vertical formats. It just keeps changing. And I create my work at standard European print sizes, just for practical reasons. So A3, A4, that's the orientation I'm choosing. And I think it just looks nice when you have it all in the same cropped format on the website. That's why I choose a square. It's like a compromise. And I also try to group images by color when I'm putting them in my portfolio. I just move them around and see how they work together. I just want it to look nice and cohesive. So I have two examples of different layouts. So let's go for that. Oh, I didn't mean to open that. Okay, so this is my website. There's like a little thing on top here that is not part of my portfolio, but this is my portfolio. I can show you, yeah, different formats. So rather than trying to squeeze them into sort of a grid, I just prefer to have this square thing here. So it goes basically from like blue to blue-green, and then there's some orange in there. This purple is sort of a little bit out of place, but a little bit pink found in this image, so a little bit orange there. I just kind of see what works together. This line is a little bit, this row is a little bit darker. So, and then we move on to more like reddish tones that are pretty rare in my portfolio. Now it gets a little bit lighter again. So I just not necessarily group them by subject matter. I mean, the series here on top belongs together, but the rest is just like, hey, what do I think looks nice together? And that's sort of my thinking. And that's pretty much it. It's really simple. I think people sometimes overcomplicate what they put in their portfolio and how they present it. So just this, I think is really simple and clean and nice. And I also have an example by an illustrator friend of mine, Louisa. She's a book cover artist. She doesn't know that I'm showing this now, but I hope she won't mind. Yeah, she's an amazing book cover artist. And since she paints book covers, all of her work has the same orientation. So she can show the images at full, what's it called? Full, not size, the format, like the whole format, just displayed in a grid like this. And I think this also looks really awesome. So if I only had portrait orientation images, I think I would do this too. So those are like 2 examples that I wanted to show you. But now we get to a pretty heavy part. I hope you're ready for it. The thing is, I could tell you, oh, you have to put your pieces on your website and you have to arrange them like that and then it looks nice. But you might say, but how do I know if it's actually a good piece? Like, nobody's telling me that. What do I do? So, of course, a good portfolio consists of good paintings. And I wanted to give you a little bit of guidance of what you can watch out for and how to evaluate your own paintings. So yeah, since there is no art director involved, or you might not have a teacher right now who can help you out, so nobody does a quality check for you, I have compiled a list of things to look out for to sort of self-check your work. And that can be for single paintings or your portfolio as a whole, just like going through that checklist and kind of seeing if it measures up to those things. So what I want you to do now is just open your own portfolio or an illustration of your choice that you've done. You can open it in your browser, on your phone, whatever works for you, but I would highly encourage you to do this now, because otherwise it's just very abstract, the thing that I'm going to be talking about. And if you have your own work there, you can look at it and follow along and actually check off those boxes to see how well you've done in addressing all these different little points.
Good idea. I like it. Get out your textbooks.
Yay! Yeah. Do you want to join too?
Wait, I'm gonna open my portfolio. No, I'm not working today. I'm just reading.
No, you're just here hanging out.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. All right. So I'm just guessing by now people have opened their work. So let's do this. It's a lot. I'm not gonna lie, but I originally compiled this list for the schoolism course I'm teaching. So that is something that is provided in the very first week with the downloadable assets, because I think just something that is very helpful, especially if you've finished something and you're not quite sure why it's not looking the way you wanted. You can just get out this list and see, like, what could it be? So let's get into it. So more often than not, if there is something that feels a little bit off in your work and you can't quite put your finger on it, something just seems weird and distorted, it has to do with perspective. So it's a good idea to just check, do all the elements share a common horizon line? That's a big thing. Like sometimes the character and the environment just don't really match. So is the character's perspective consistent with the environment is something that you can ask yourself. Do I have a clear grasp on what I can see from above or below? Like if you've ever seen these ellipses, just a good idea to check in which direction they're curving and all that. But I don't want to get too technical, just something to watch out for. Are the vanishing points placed too close together or too far apart? I think beginners tend to push them too far together. So very rarely you have 2 vanishing points within one illustration. So That doesn't happen very often, yeah. And perspective is so tricky. And I put it first because it's the thing where like, what is it? I can't tell, but yeah, that is often the issue. And next up is character. So ask yourself, is their design intentional and appropriate for who they are? Does their body language support the story? Maybe you are going for somebody who was supposed to look angry, but they just like don't really, so it looks a little strange, stuff like that. And is the anatomy correct? Then we have set design, or basically like what the environment looks like, if there is any in your work. Ask yourself, did you put enough care and consideration into the design? Is it serving its purpose for the story? Is there too much or too little detail? That is something that can be an issue sometimes. Then we have color and light. That is the biggest one. That's not the only slide. There's going to be a second one. Is the color scheme appropriate for your story? So does it really convey the mood that you are going for? Were you going for a peaceful mood, but this just looks cold and drab? So just like ask yourself if it's actually what you were aiming for. Could the color scheme be more or less saturated? Does it look balanced? Is there a juxtaposition of harmony and contrast? So is it just all like crazy saturated in your face? Or are there more grayer areas of rest in between? That could be a question. Could certain areas be emphasized or toned down? How do light and dark colors play together? Did you use color to draw attention to the main areas of interest? Or maybe there's something in the corner that is drawing a huge amount of attention, even though it's not really an important detail. That sometimes happens. Is the lighting believable? I purposefully didn't say realistic because we're not necessarily going for realism. So I think believability is something that is a word that expresses just that thing that you were going for, and to kind of achieve your goal in that illustration, and that goal might not necessarily be realism.
Oh yeah.
More color and light. Do you have a clear grasp on the light sources you're working with, or light source? Again, you might not even have a clear light source. You might just be working with flat colors. If that's your goal, then adjust your your expectations to that.
Oh, good.
I'm talking so much. Jeez. Does the lighting support the story? Does it draw attention where you need it? Could there be more light or shadows throughout the scene? Proportions. That's also one of these more abstract things that you might not think about necessarily. And what I mean by proportion is just like how big or small certain things are in the scene. If you have a scene with like a huge sky and a little character, those are the proportions next to each other. So yeah, are the elements in your scene well balanced? Do the major masses have the right amount of variety to serve the story? If I go back to that example, if I want to have a scene that looks vast and open and free, it might be a good idea to just have that huge sky in there because it serves the story that I'm trying to tell. But if I want to tell a story of a character being sad, I might zoom into their face a bit more and serve my story that way. So
No, I was just because people are loving this list in the chat.
Oh, really? That is awesome.
They're loving it. So a lot of people were asking if the slides are going to be available. I think now is a good time to answer that question because they love the list.
Yeah, I was gonna say, hey, it's in the video. You can grab like screen grabs if you want to, or you can sign up for the schoolism course. But if you're loving it so much, I might put them up on the website as well. Yeah, let me think about that for a second. But I think I'm gonna put them up. I'm gonna be nice.
Because
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Oh wow, I'm
So
so glad. Thank you.
they're all super happy. So yeah, I wanted to help
Yay,
out.
that's great. Because that's the sort of thing that I never had and I wish I
Yeah,
had
definitely.
had.
Definitely.
So,
Yeah, same.
yeah, okay. So, proportions. Ask yourself, should they be more varied or even? So, if everything in your scene sort of has the same size, that can be a little bit boring. But if you're going for boring, for whatever reason, that is appropriate. So again, just sort of have your intention in mind and then think about whether the things that you're putting into your paintings serve that intention and kind of communicate the message that you're trying to convey. So equally, you can ask yourself, can you push their relationships to one another? So the relationship of the proportions. So if you go back to that sky example, if the sky doesn't seem huge enough and the character still seems to be too large, just kind of push that relationship and get the character to be smaller and get the sky to be even bigger in the frame. Another fun thing is tangents. That is, if you don't know, when things are touching in a funny way in the images. So weird coincidences of lines. If someone is wearing a hat and there's a window right behind them, and that window frame is touching the top of the hat exactly.
Oh
And
my
that just
God, giving me nightmares.
I'm sorry.
I
Just
hate
that's a
tangents.
me too. That's a very clear example of a tangent that is just distracting to see. So ask yourself if you can see any tangents in your work that are distracting, and ask yourself if elements could be moved further away or closer to each other to resolve those tangents. All right, moving on. Cropping. So, cropping or dimensions or what sort of section of the scene you're showing in your illustration, because I always tend to think of illustrations as if you're looking through a viewfinder of a camera and you're just like looking around in this huge world, and then you find this one frame, this one scene, and then you capture that within your illustration frame. So I just always imagine that there's something going on beyond that illustration that I'm painting, and it's just not that tiny frame. So cropping, yeah. Is the crop that you've chosen emphasizing the story? It kind of goes back to this thing I mentioned earlier about proportions. If you want to show a character's emotions, it might be a good idea to zoom in closer to their face to show their expression, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It all comes down to what you want to say in your work. Also, is there something that doesn't serve a purpose and that can go? That is really important because sometimes I see people create work, they paint this like interior and they show this room and it's like all the way up to the ceiling, but there's not much going on at the ceiling. It's not really of interest, and all the action is happening on the floor. So I think sometimes it's a good idea to just crop certain parts out because they're not really serving a purpose in that case. Even if you put work into it, it can be hard to just let it go. But if it serves the story and the image, I think that's a good idea. Same thing or similar thing, is there something distracting that has to go? So If your action is happening somewhere on the left in the image and then on the right there is something in the background that you put in for decoration and it's just demanding a ton of attention, it might have to go as well. But it's always a case-to-case thing that you have to decide. You can also ask yourself, can a different crop make the scene more interesting? And does the subject have the right amount of room around them to tell the story? Sometimes they need a bit more breathing room. Sometimes if you want it to feel a bit more claustrophobic, you might crop it in tighter. Again, always very individual. Then we have depth. So you can ask yourself, does your painting feel dimensional? Does it feel flat, maybe? Maybe it's what you're going for. Again, just always going back to this, what do I want? Is it coming across the way I want it? And adjusting to that. And are there elements overlapping each other? I think that is also a beginner mistake I see often. It's just like you paint someone riding a horse in the desert, and then there are mountains in the background, and then they never ever overlap each other. It's just like a horse is on the left, and then there's a mountain on the right, and then next to that there's another mountain, and then there's a cloud on top of that, and it's just all in its own place, and nothing is ever overlapping each other. That just doesn't really happen in nature, and it looks much more natural and nice if you let things be in front of other things.
Yeah, definitely. I used to do that a lot.
Yeah?
Yeah, everything was just like not overlapping very well. Now I'm like so paranoid about it that I always have to have something in the foreground and like overlapping everything, so I get that depth. I love it.
Yeah, I think that's also a tendency when you're drawing as a kid. I just remember these like classical childhood drawings of like the person and the house and the clouds and the tree and the butterfly, and it's just all like perfectly next to each other.
So
Yeah. Okay, I think we're getting closer to the end. It's so much. Whew. Focus. Focus, focus. Is the eye moving around the page in the way you intend it to? So, or again, as I mentioned, is there something that you look at all the time that you didn't necessarily want to be looked at, that isn't that important? And through composition, contrast, color, and light, were you able to bring attention to the main subject? So actually drawing the focus and the attention to where you wanted it to go. Is there something that is distracting from it, like from the main subject? And can you knock back certain areas and bring others forward? That is sort of a matter of atmosphere. So just this classic example, if you have mountains in the distance, they're not going to be very dark, they're going to be very light and bluish because of the sky and the atmosphere. So that's what I call knocking them back, just like painting a very light, hazy layer on top of them, just like pushing them back all the way into the distance. And then I think that's our last point, detail. Just as a final assessment, ask yourself, is there enough visual interest throughout the piece? Have the different surfaces been given enough attention, or does anything feel sloppy? So that can have to do with mark making and how detailed you render things out maybe, or how clean the edges are in certain places, all that. Could there be more or fewer detail in certain areas? And does anything feel too smooth or too rough? Just like how you handle textures. Okay, I think, yes, that was our list.
What?
We made it through. Yes, I think now is a good place to maybe answer a couple of questions, if there are any, about this list. Otherwise, the next thing we'll be doing is moving forward to some concrete examples of pre-selected portfolios. Yeah.
Yeah. Give me your questions, people.
And if you don't have any, that's
Now
fine
is
too.
the time.
Yeah, and while I'm doing like overpaints later, I will be able to answer questions as well and talk a bit
Yes.
more slowly with not as much heavy content as I just delivered.
Yes.
So
Here's
it'll
a
be
question.
more chill. Yeah.
How to not overdo something and keep it simple. I think it depends what you're talking about, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely depends. I always like to compare my work to other work that is in a similar vein. So if I'm going for something that is quite minimal and that doesn't have a ton of detail, I just pull up a couple of pieces by people who have done that successfully. And while I'm working on mine, I just compare like, am I going in a direction that I wasn't intending of going into? And how have they handled that? Even if they didn't include a ton of detail, how did they balance everything? How are they handling colors and textures and surfaces and all that? And I think that always helps me to stay on track. Do you have any methods for that?
Basically the same. I think, especially looking for work that inspires me, I guess, like you said in the beginning, that's like in the same vein of what I want to do. And then I would check back with my own work to see if it works.
Yeah, yeah.
But by now, I feel like I just go with it. Like, I don't know, like developing a feeling for it and a feeling for
Yeah.
each painting. Yeah. There are a lot of questions now. God,
Oh,
people.
now they're going for it.
Okay, how do you keep the energy from the starting sketch in the final piece?
Oh, I don't really. I lose some of that. I think that's unavoidable. I think there's just like more energy in sketches. That's just the nature of them. And as soon as you add rendering and more detail, you're going to compromise that dynamic and fluent line by introducing more realism, maybe, and more detail and more three dimensionality. So I think it's always a balance. To introduce something, you have to give something else away a bit. That's just how it works. You cannot have something that is perfectly dynamic and exaggerated and cartoony and realistic and perfectly rendered, but also expressive brushstrokes. It just doesn't happen. You cannot have everything. So you just got to compromise and see what you want to keep.
Yeah. What should I do if I don't complete with the requirements of the list? Like if something is missing.
I'd say maybe focus on studying that detail. I think I'm not perfect at all these things by no means, absolutely not. There are always things that are more successful than others. But if I notice that I'm severely lacking in the perspective department, I will go ahead and try and improve that and just like do a couple of studies. Take photos of interiors, for example, and trace the lines and really see how perspective and convergence works in reality and try to apply that to my paintings. And same with anatomy or color and light, detail. It just, you can tackle these things and find ways to practice them. And I just do studies. I study photographs, I study the artists I like, and try to build up my skill that way, piece by piece.
Yeah. Just a comment, like general comment to about some of these questions. We are talking about, or Jamila is talking about, portfolios with personal work. This is not so much targeted towards client work. So yeah, I just wanted to say that because there are a lot of questions about client portfolios.
People, read the title. It's called no, it's called How to Make Work That Is Not for Clients or something.
Yeah.
No, I don't mean to be mean. It's just funny.
No, it is funny. It's just that we're not talking specifically about getting client work here. So yeah. And what's the line between inspiration and art theft?
Ooh, that is an interesting one. That is very interesting. I don't know. Sometimes I saw a post today on Twitter of someone saying, this person pretty much ripped off my work. And I was looking at it, I was like, yeah, but I think it's just different enough so that they can get away with it. It's just, what, can you own the pose? Can you own the composition? Can you own that? I don't want to comment on that because I don't know where that line is. But I always try to put enough of my own spin on things to not go into that territory. I love being inspired by things, but I also think it's a little boring to just copy something that someone else did. Yeah, I'm not interested in it really. So yeah, I think everybody has to decide that by themselves, unless the lawyer is knocking on the door, then it becomes serious. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have a definitive answer for that. Definitely not.
Then how much time is spent researching versus actually making the art?
Ooh, I think that's also different for every person. I love research. I think it's the part I enjoy as much as the actual painting. So I just love browsing images. I love looking for reference. I love looking for color inspiration, inspiration for places, for characters, for designs, for everything I just mentioned. So you just gotta decide that yourself. I think for every new piece I make, I research for an hour, 1.5 hours maybe. It's kind of my thing. And then I paint for 40 hours. So yeah, that's my balance.
Good. Do you think showing other people's work for education purposes only is okay, like with the influence map? Credit them should be okay, yeah.
Yes, credit them and that's fine. Yeah.
Also, because apparently it's not that clear what a portfolio is for, if not for clients. Well, I mean, Jamila is an independent artist. I'm on a way to becoming an independent artist. Basically, you still have to sell your work. You're just not selling it to a client, but to people who want your work on their walls or on t-shirts.
That is very true. And you might also not want to go this route of tailoring your work towards a certain company. Like I said in the very beginning, it's like, want to work for magic, make paintings that look like magic cards. But instead, you just want to stay true to yourself and create a portfolio that is a reflection of your tastes and your aesthetics and your interests, and hope to find work that way, because it might attract clients. That can happen too. I've seen people just like creating the work that they love, not tailoring it towards anybody, and getting work that way. So that can happen. And there are also artists who do work for companies, but they do their own work on the side, and they are launching art books and stuff like that. So what's his name? Snatty, I think is his username. He's been doing those really nice loose paintings, one every day for a year. They're so beautiful. And he's doing that on top of his day job, and his work that he's doing for his day job is copyrighted. It's not really his, but the personal work he's done on the side, he can use however he pleases. So now he's launching a book, and that's awesome. And you could be doing something like that too.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, I'm ready to move on soon. If you have one more question, maybe. If not, that's fine.
There are a lot of questions, but I think we can answer some of them later on as well.
Yeah.
Do the overpaintings.
Yeah, I'll just go into some more concrete territory now. So a couple of weeks ago, I asked on Twitter for people to send me their personal work if they want to get a chance to be reviewed on this live stream. So I selected 3 of them. So special thanks to Lovisa Beckson, Stephanie Kopp, and Sonia Lopez. Thank you. Here are their websites. Just to credit, I'm going to look at them in a minute. So yeah, this is the first one. I just pulled this into this presentation to make it easier, make it faster. That is Lovisa. So when I looked at this portfolio, I was kind of not going into detail yet. I was just like taking it in as a whole and how cohesive it felt to me. And there were a couple of pieces that felt like they belonged together nicely, but some of them just like seemed a little bit odd. So the first one was this like Japanese storefront that didn't quite seem to match with the vibe of some of these other pieces. This character study or like character design sheet down here didn't quite seem to match. Then this piece of that character, I would put that with the other characters. And then we have like these 2 portraits. They might go well together as a pair. But just with the overall impression I got from the portfolio, there were some pieces that just went nicely together and that were the stronger work. And I left those in there and kind of faded out the rest. So this is where we left off. Just took those out. And from these that were left, I think this is looking already a lot more cohesive. And there were 2 that I thought weren't as strong as the others. So this like fan art piece here, I think is lacking a little bit of detail and depth compared to the other ones. And this piece down here at the bottom kind of has some technical things going on that I would fix, and also some cropping issues. Like it just is not a snapshot of that room really. It just goes on with the walls in a little bit odd way.
Tamila,
Yeah?
are you actually pointing at the pieces because people can't see your cursor?
Oh, they can't. Oh, no. I am very, very sorry. And I'm just going to describe it with words. So the piece, top row, 3rd from the right, or just like the middle one, basically, that lacks a little bit of depth and detail in certain places compared to the other pieces. And the very last one in the corner on the right, like bottom right, that has a little bit of a weird cropping situation going on. It looks a little bit designy in the way that it's framed with this purple, compared to the other ones that feel more like actual scenes that are being portrayed. So, oh, I did something weird on my other screen. Okay, good. So I took those out as well for now, and now we're left with 4 pieces that I think are the strongest in that body of work that has been presented, and I want to sort of take them as a jumping off point of building that portfolio further. So again, I would always say quality over quantity. I think this makes a much nicer impression if they have these 4 pieces on your website and people can look at them and they're nice and detailed, versus just like having all these others in there that might not quite match. I'm not saying that more detail is necessarily better, but I just think these are stronger. And before I go into an overpaint for this, I wanted to look at 2 other portfolios as well. So this is Lovisa's portfolio I was kind of showing earlier. This is it on the website. This is this piece I was talking about with the cropping. And I have picked out 2 other ones. This is Stephanie's work. I think there's lots of great stuff going on here, especially these first illustrations are absolutely beautiful, I think. But then, again, it's the same thing. I would just take out some of these pieces in here because they don't quite match that well. You can put them on a separate page under like character concept or something. So this one and this one is a little bit odd next to these rendered finished illustrations. For this piece, so with this interior, I would say you don't need to show us 2 versions of it. Just like pick your favorite version and put it in your portfolio. And then again, on a separate website where you're talking more about your project, you can show this sort of progression here if you want to. For this piece here on the left, I would kind of get rid of the watermark on top of it. That is a little bit distracting. Again, if you're worried about copyright, that is a fair point, but it just, you want people to be able to take in your work as it is without being distracted. Then this one piece here on the right, this blue one, I think there's also a little bit of a depth issue compared to some others. It lacks a bit of visual interest. So I would consider maybe reworking it or taking it out. This character piece on the left seems to be telling less of a story and seems to be more of a character sketch. So I would either move that to a separate portfolio or just rethink how to present that character, because all these other pieces are like so story heavy and have a very clear mood and all that. I mean, this is moody as well, but just it doesn't seem to live up to the others. And then this one with the girl on the horse is lacking a little bit of detail in certain places and depth as well.
Zelda. Sorry.
That's fine. Yeah, it's nice fan art. For this one, I'm not completely sold on the story and the pose. Just seems like it was a model posing and you took this and put it into a fantasy setting. So this would be a case of, does the pose really communicate what you were trying to say? Just something to think about. Maybe yes, maybe not. For me, it just doesn't seem 100% convincing. Yeah, so these are just like my first impressions when I go through this. And it's not like, oh, your work isn't good enough, whatever. No, it's great. It's just a matter of filtering it and taking out the stuff that is sort of making the experience less enjoyable or less cohesive, let's say. So if you want to look at the portfolio, just you want to be able to take it all in as a whole and not be like, oh, this seems different. So that is definitely something to think about. And that is like, for a lot of people, the biggest issue that I see. It's not a matter of, oh, you need more great work. No, you just need to be able to edit your portfolio and be brave enough to have fewer pieces in there. That's fine, because that's also a client thing. But generally, you say you're judged by your worst piece, not your best piece. So if your potential client might look at your website, they will also see the weaker pieces in there, and that's going to be the standard that they're setting for you. So you don't want that. You want to present your strongest work. And also, if there is no client, just like to the people who are watching or looking at your portfolio. And then I have an ArtStation portfolio here by Sonia. And this is kind of the same thing, really. I've been talking about this for I'm talking about this for the third time now. Just a matter of editing, seeing what fits together, what doesn't. So we have these like watercolor pieces in this very extreme format. First of all, I think it would be amazing to see these as a whole. So if you had a website, you could just stack them on top of each other so that you see the whole thing and not just like a tiny crop of it, because a square really doesn't do it justice. And let's see, there's a second one. It's loading pretty slowly right now. Yeah, this one goes with it. It's just like a perfectly cohesive body of work. And then there's this, and I'm like, what? This is different. I'm confused. And I don't want to be confused when I'm looking at your portfolio. I want to be like, oh yeah, of course this belongs together. All right, yeah. And there are other pieces that work with this style as well, but like this watercolor, traditional and digital mix, I think, is something that should be presented in isolation, especially because they have these crazy formats, and I think they're really beautiful. So you're not doing them justice by putting them together with something else that doesn't quite match them, like this. This matches with the other piece we've seen, but they should be separate somewhere. Yeah, that's my impression. Be able to edit, that is really important. So now, going back, let me see, do I have something else? Yeah, I have this portfolio, Louisa's portfolio that I talked about in the beginning. I pulled these 4 pieces that I thought were the most successful, and I'm going to be doing a little overpaint on that bottom left piece, because when I compare these, I get the sense that this is a little bit weaker compared to the others. I think the strongest are the 2 on top. They're very much immediate in the action. Message is communicated clearly, the mood is there, all there, and the distribution of detail is nice. There's a good balance. We get the sense that we're in the scene, whereas this one seems to be a little bit, I don't know, not as convincing. I don't feel like I'm part of this. It's just like, oh, you place the shape there and then you place the character there, but it's not quite as successful as the others. So that is my plan for now. I'm going to be starting on that, and while I paint on top of it, I am going to take questions.
All right.
All right.
Questions.
Yeah.
Someone is asking about using watermarks again, but I think you covered that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I
Watermarks.
think I get the intention, but it's just more distracting than helpful, really. Yeah. What do you think?
I used to use them back in my DeviantArt days, but I don't do that either because I want people to see the whole and enjoy the whole artwork. And if someone is intent on stealing my art, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
People have managed to remove watermarks.
Oh, that is very true. Yeah.
So yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you put it on social media, especially, there will be people who will go from reposting your art without credit to copying it to just, stealing it.
Oh, the best thing is just like people who post stupid poems under your work. And it's like, today's poem. Oh, God. Not this again.
Oh, so good. Okay. What are some ways to stabilize income as an artist without clients? Maybe refer to our stream from yesterday.
Definitely, yeah. We're not going to talk about that today. It's just
Yeah.
like there's a lot of information on it that we covered yesterday, and we also couldn't cover it yesterday because it's so much, and we pointed you to different resources and things.
Exactly. Check out that stream.
Yeah.
If you like to use two different styles, how can you show off both of these?
Do two separate portfolios, or do like mini series as like sub portfolios, basically. And yeah, watch the beginning of this stream because I talked about it.
Sorry, my cat just jumped off my lap.
Oh, nice.
Because someone is asking, the last stream was called, what was it called again?
Going independent.
Yeah.
How to make a living off of personal art, I think. Yeah.
And you can find it on Jamila's channel.
Yes. Just playing around with a different crop, but I don't think this is it. I wanna.
How to start going from studies to your own final piece. Like, how do you know when you can or are ready to start your own projects?
I think you're always ready to do your personal work. I think it's a misconception that you have to study, and then at some point you are allowed to work on the stuff that you actually want to do. That's so wrong. Just like go for it, I would say. You might not think that you're good enough, and you might not be, but you'll learn on the job, basically. So I think that is really important, just like allowing yourself to do the things that you set out to do. What do you think?
Hold on, I was replying to something. Yeah, well, for me, it has developed to me thinking about what I want to paint, doing my research, and then doing the studies while I do the piece. Like, I don't do studies just because I want to do studies anymore, because I get bored easily.
Yeah.
It sounds so bad, but I do. So when I have a piece where I have to paint something that I'm not that familiar with, I will do the studies while I'm actually working on that piece already. So yeah. I get easily bored. It's just the way it is.
It's fine. Yeah, I think it's just like, I don't know where this came from. It was this early conceptart.com mentality. Just like, you gotta do studies. And at some point, people stopped asking why. What's the purpose of those studies? And you sort of lose track while you're doing them. You're just obsessed with doing them. But the purpose of study is if I want to paint something that has a forest in it and I've never done that before, or I want to paint different trees than I've ever painted before, I just like pull up an image of a tree and I look at it and then I figure out how to paint it, and that is my study. Exactly. And that is serving the purpose in that case. And I think that's really important to not go like, oh, I guess today I'm going to study cars because I have to be able to paint cars for whatever reason. But no, please don't, people. I mean, if that's your thing, sure, but don't feel forced to do something like that just because people told you studies are good.
Yeah, exactly.
I can be really, I get riled up about that.
Yeah, me too.
Makes me
mad. There's a lot of these mentalities that I get a bit upset about. Anyway, How old is too old to have a portfolio review? Sometimes late bloomers may have an issue with embarrassment or something while trying to approach for guidance.
Oh no, you never
Never too
ever
old.
too old, never. And you have something that young people don't have, which is life experience. You have learned a bunch of things in your lifetime, and you've come up with strategies on how to approach things, and you have all these techniques that a young person might not necessarily have. So you have a disadvantage in that you have maybe a little bit of catching up to do in your mind, but that's not necessarily true. And you have so much other things going on for you. And I don't think anybody who's giving your portfolio review is going to say, oh, what are you doing here? You're old. That's just not going to happen. And especially earlier, these days with the internet, you get the impression that you have to be 16 and be an amazing artist. But back then, people were starting their careers in their 40s, 50s. I don't know. People always throw around the example of Da Vinci painting the Mona Lisa when he was, I think, in his 60s or something. I don't know. And our society values youth way too much. I think it's a problem.
Yes.
Another touchy subject.
Yeah. I feel old. No. Okay.
Don't.
You know me. How do you balance any need for experimentation with keeping the chat just jumped, okay, with keeping say your Instagram consistent? Selected portfolios are one thing, but what about social media galleries?
Oh, can you repeat the first part of the question?
Oh, sorry.
The very first part?
How do you balance any need for experimentation with keeping, say, your Instagram consistent?
That is a very good question. I think the way to do this is just being open in your communication with your audience, because they're the ones who will be surprised by that sudden change. And just tell them like, hey, I'm trying out this new thing. What do you think? And they're probably going to be a little bit apprehensive in the beginning. They're going to be like, oh, this is not what we expected. But if it's really fun for you, I think they're going to come around to it. I just remember, who was it? Dave Raposa was changing his style pretty drastically at some point, and people at first were like, we don't like this. What is that? But then they got used to it and they enjoyed it. And I think don't be afraid to make that jump, but also just like talk about it. I think there's no harm in that.
Yes. Another question that is specifically about the overpainting. You're adding a background to to add land, but this is fan art of a piece of art piece of Kingdom Hearts. How could you fix it while not changing the look of the island?
Is it? Yeah, I was thinking that because I thought the shape was kind of odd. I knew that it was fan art. I was like, is this a fixed thing? But just this like lump in the middle didn't seem to be very appealing in this composition. So I was trying to get something else in on the sides. But if that is not available, if I need to change that or keep that island as it is, I would probably crop it differently. So like get one side of it out of the frame and move the character over to another side, just to like not have it completely in the middle and cut off and like empty space around it. Because I think that was making it look a little bit visually not interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, you can zoom in basically. I mean,
yeah,
it's an island, but you can still, yeah, exactly.
That was what I tried first, but that was a little bit too I was cutting off too much, and I did like the sky colors that were going on. So yeah, I opted for this now. It's not right. I learned that now.
Don't worry about it.
That's like fan art, right?
Those asking about treating Instagram like a portfolio. We covered this at the beginning. Don't treat social media as a portfolio.
Yeah.
Treat your portfolio as a portfolio, and social media. Sorry.
Word.
Okay, which is better for social media, quality or quantity?
A good mixture of both, but quantity is encouraged by the algorithms. So I would say don't produce work just to throw it on social media. That is not a great idea. But if you have sketches and works in progress and other things, feel free to put them on there, stuff that you wouldn't necessarily put in your portfolio.
How do you get traffic to your website if most people just go to Instagram, ArtStation, etc.?
Oops. Sorry. Through social media.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that is the circle of life, really.
Put your address everywhere. Your website address, sorry.
Yeah, it helps when you have something on the website that is a destination for people. So I have my store on there. So if I have any new products, I am automatically directing people to my website. I also used to have a resource page that is under construction right now, and a blog is something I had. So again, don't feel the need to like make up these things. You're like, oh, I need a blog now. Okay. Nope. Just if you have it on there and it is something that people might find interesting and want to check out, that is a way to direct them to your website. Or sometimes I post links if I have done an interview or something, so I can say, hey, check this out. It's on my website. All that.
Any exercises to develop stronger design skills faster? I'm guessing doing studies from life helps you develop rendering skills. What's the equivalent for developing stylization skills?
Ooh, do you have a good answer for that? Because I am not great at that. You are more of a designy person.
Reference? No,
Yeah.
it's basically, I mean, it always comes down to the same thing, like looking for what you like. What kind of stylization or design stuff do you like? For me, for example, it's Art Nouveau. So I go and I look at a ton of Mucha and I'm like, oh my God, Mucha, amazing.
Yeah.
And then I think, oh, I can start incorporating some of his design elements, but kind of twist it to make it my own. So that's basically how I do it for something like that. Always
Yeah.
come back to reference and looking for inspiration, I guess. Also, yes, Mucha was
Yeah.
amazing. I absolutely love his work.
And he was a great, great, great painter and designer and like craftsman and all that. Insane.
His sketches, oh,
Yeah.
my heart. Okay. How would you recommend getting back into drawing after taking a break?
Ooh.
Just do it.
Just do it. Maybe don't expect too much at the beginning. I usually just doodle something or do a study. So I actually like doing studies. So just like take a photo that you find interesting of something and replicate it. That is something that is pretty fun for me and that warms me up nicely. So I enjoy that. Like, I don't try to do a big illustration right away when I'm back from a break. That is just a recipe for trouble. I take it slowly. Just like when you haven't been exercising for a long time and you're like, oh, I know I'm not that strong right now. I do some like little exercises, some stretches, and that's gonna be fine. And then tomorrow maybe I can do more. Take it slowly. Yeah. It's the wrong brush. What am I doing? Jesus.
Jamila, what are you doing?
What am I doing?
Anyway, a couple of people have, I think I've seen the question a couple of times now about putting sketches and like development shots into your portfolio. And I would say it really depends. If you're going for a concept art portfolio, I think they like seeing that. If you're going for illustration work, show your best work.
Yeah, illustrations are just like finished paintings.
Yes.
No sketches in there. Wouldn't put sketches in.
No. It looks pretty. I like the reflection. Everyone loving the reflection in this painting now.
It just completes it, I think. I was just like, what is happening? What is missing? Oh, it's a reflection. All right. And it's just such an easy thing in Photoshop. If this was a traditional painting, I'd have to flip it over and paint it all again. But nope. Nope.
Do you have any advice? Yeah, what?
No, I was just gonna say I think I'm almost done with this. I mean, you could do more, could spend hours on it, but that's just like
like on your own work.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. Do you have any advice to lose fear of using colors? I see great artists like you, and it seems that everything flows more naturally. I really want to enjoy more the process. Enjoy the process more, yeah.
Oh, it's a tough one because I've never been afraid of colors. I've always used a lot. But I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I just tend to look at artists that I love, really. So I'm just like, I love anime backgrounds. I think that is no secret. I love Studio Ghibli and you name it, the backgrounds in Your Name and all sorts of animes I watched as a kid. So that is just something I'm extremely inspired by and that I will come back to again and again. So sometimes a fun exercise I did was opening up a Studio Ghibli background and a photo of a forest or something, and then I would paint that forest from the photo with the Studio Ghibli colors. So basically like combining two references into one study, and that forced me to not just blindly copy it, but analyzing it and applying things as well. Yeah, I think I'm gonna leave this now. Maybe I'll throw a gradient map on top and see what happens, but I think that's all I wanted to do with this. Gradient map, great.
Yay.
Great gradient map. Oh no.
No.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, I'm gonna get in trouble.
Do you identify a turning point where you settled your current style? Maybe changing your palette or changing your brush?
Ooh, it wasn't a brush or palette thing, it was bigger. It was acknowledging my past and my anime influence that teachers had tried to drill out of me for centuries. And I just went with it, and then everything changed. It was so much more fun, and now I really enjoy myself. Yeah.
I think it's very personal when something like that happens. Because in the end, art is extremely personal. So
Yeah.
stuff like that is as well. Changes like that are as well. Yeah.
Okay, now I'm just gonna do a before and after thing.
Mhm.
Started with this, ended up with this. I think we're more connected to the character because he's closer to us, and just getting those reflections in adds more detail, adds a bit more dimensionality, visual interest, balance. The sky also is a bit more broken up now. And I think it fits a bit more nicely with the rest of the portfolio. But again, you could have cropped it, zoomed in a bit more. There are lots of options. That was just the first one I wanted to go with, even though I changed that island now. I'm very sorry, Kingdom Hearts fans.
How dare you?
Yeah, shame on me. And oh, just real quick, like really, really quickly, for this piece down here, with this sort of energy field or shield, I would say, find a way to make it go over the characters a bit more. That would also have a nice effect. Sort of covering them a bit more and then erasing out those parts, like this honeycomb structure, but do it nicer than I'm doing now. So just like really conveying that sense that they're surrounded by it. So that is something I would say for that. Yeah, but again, quality over quantity, going with fewer pieces and taking those out that don't quite fit in. I think that's a good call. And I have what was her name? Stephanie? Oh god, let me check.
I think so.
Stephanie, yeah,
Yes.
good. And I have Stephanie's work here, and I pulled up a couple of pieces as well. Those here, these are two swan illustrations, and the two portrait format ones on the right, all really nicely go together. Lots of variation in detail, color and light, values, all that. But then this piece with the horse was in the portfolio as well. And if I compare it to the others, it falls a little bit flat in just how the detail is distributed and the visual interest of the piece, and just the overall balance, I think, is so much stronger in the other pieces. So I just kind of want to take a stab at it and see what I can introduce here to have it match up a bit more.
Let's go.
Let's go.
You have any advice? Chat. You have any advice for someone who's burned out with art and just not enjoying it anymore? I love art, but I'm frustrated with my lack of results. How can I learn to enjoy art again?
Well, if you're really burned out, I'd say take a break. That sounds serious. Yeah, I think stretching yourself too thin is so dangerous. No, it's not worth it. And if you're not enjoying yourself anymore at all, it's for me a clear sign to just take a step back and take a break.
I'm pretty sure that once you take a break, like an actual proper break, get it off your mind. And then when you come back eventually, you can just remind yourself, why did you love art in the first place? And maybe go back to the beginning a bit. I know that that helps me, not so much because of burnout, but because of depression. So it helps me a lot to just remind myself, why did I fall in love with art in the first place? Why do I still love it? So yeah,
Yeah.
soul searching.
Mm-hmm. And just like stop putting pressure on yourself, or try to stop. Because when you're thinking, oh, I'm just not good enough, I hate this, this is so hard, it's gonna get worse and worse for you. You're gonna enjoy it less and less. And it gets harder to come back from that, unfortunately. Once you've really taken a toll and your health is declining and you're feeling bad, it's just, you will need a long time to recover from that. So be kind to yourself. Kind of ask yourself what you would tell a friend to do in that situation. You know, when they come to you and say, "Oh, I don't know, my art sucks. It's just so frustrating. I hate it." What would you tell them to do? And then be kind enough to extend that advice to yourself.
And yeah, because someone is mentioning creative block or art block, but with a deadline when you absolutely need to finish work, well, you gotta push through. That's the struggle with deadlines. It's why I don't like them.
Yeah, it's tough.
What you gonna do? Sometimes, I mean, forcing yourself to do art is sometimes not the best thing to do, especially when dealing with burnout. But when you have a creative or block or art block, sometimes that is what you have to do. Push through it and force yourself to just finish something. At least for me, I mean, this is again very subjective and personal. So, yeah.
Yeah. So
Stay
what
healthy though.
yeah, definitely. And I don't have a lot to do with clients. I mean, I did, but I can never remember if I actually had like an art block. Mostly it was just like, oh, I'm not loving this illustration, but I guess I'm gonna finish it. So that is something I've experienced, but yeah, it can be really frustrating.
Yeah.
What I'm doing right now for this painting, successfully or not successfully, is just like trying to bring in a little bit more variation in different shapes to make it a little less flat. So I'm addressing these clouds, and that is definitely something that I would spend more time on if I would do this for myself. Just like getting all these shapes in there and like nice fluffier clouds and like stretchier clouds. I don't know. So now I'm just like roughing them in. And for the ground, that is something I noticed right away, that it sort of seemed like they were floating. That might be intentional, but it just seems like you were going for rounding them, but you didn't really follow through. It's like I'm talking to to Stephanie, although she might not even be here, but just like feels like
She
the
will see it.
artist was going for for something and didn't quite know how to finish it. So it's really easy to just like grab reference for someone riding a horse and seeing how like the dirt kicks up or water. I guess there is like a seashore, which I guess we can emphasize as well. Get like a nice hard line in the background. And I'm not going for realistic colors because these colors aren't necessarily realistic. I'm just like thinking, oh, hey, maybe I'll make this line blue, seeing what it looks like. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It's just trial and error.
Oh, she's in the chat. She's in the chat.
Awesome.
She's
Hello.
listening.
Great. Thank you for providing your work to be ridiculed. No, it's really nice work. I love it.
All the personal art, personal work I'm doing is very vulnerable. I feel it's hard to show it, but it's all I can do right now. What to do?
Yeah, I mean, the more personal it gets, the harder it gets to put it out there.
Yes.
But also the better it can get, I think. The more of yourself you put in there, the more other people will be able to relate to it. So it's just asking yourself how much of that you're comfortable with, really. But I don't know. It's hard to answer that because everybody has to decide that for themselves. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, same. Again, a lot of this is very very personal.
Yeah.
So I've shared a couple of pieces that were very personal, and I actually, it was hard to share them, but in the end, I was glad that I did, because those pieces were the ones that touched a lot of people, that a lot of people could relate to, and that was just something nice. But again, don't share it if you feel completely uncomfortable with it. Like,
Yeah,
this is not something you should force yourself to do at all.
definitely. Yeah, right now I'm thinking about cropping because I feel like we could get in a little bit closer, but then this like open, nice feeling might go away. But I guess instead, what I'm going to do is make them a bit smaller, maybe, because they do feel pretty large, right? Let's see. Don't know if I'm just imagining that, but I'm gonna try.
Go for
Talking to myself.
it. Is all good. Is all good. Um, a couple of people have been mentioning physical portfolios, like actually printing out your work and how to arrange those, one piece per page. Do
Yeah,
you do it at all?
that's
And
the
so on.
usual layout. I did have a physical portfolio at some point to bring to conventions and stuff and events, but I just brought it like 2 times, I guess, and then that was the advent of the iPad that everybody
Yeah.
had, and now it's just like obsolete, I think.
I think it also is like not very practical,
Yeah,
to just carry your huge ass portfolio everywhere.
that is very true. Yeah. And you have to figure out like how to print it, are the colors correct, all that sort of stuff. That just if you present it on the screen that you created it or like a properly calibrated screen, that is not an issue anymore that you have to worry about.
Yeah. How did you? Oh, good. Did something happen?
No, I'm good. I'm always
Did you
talking to
lose
myself.
your? Did you lose your brushes?
Nope. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, good. So, uh, how did you push out of the "I don't love this, but I guess I'm gonna finish it" block? That's definitely something I often struggle with.
I think finished is better than nothing. And since we were talking about client work, then that was just like I have a deadline. I have to
Yeah.
get it in. There is no choice. But now I just tend to finish things, even if I'm not too excited about them. I rarely scrap anything just because of this sunk cost fallacy. I'm like, I've already spent 5 hours on this. I'm gonna finish it. How about you?
Um, Sorry, reading questions and
No,
then
that's fine.
something. Yeah. Usually, when I scrap something, I do it pretty early on. So I don't actually let myself get to a point where I'm like, ooh, I spent 15 hours on this.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't even matter anymore.
Yeah.
So I know pretty early if I'm into a piece or not. But again, preference, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, I have so many pieces, or had so many pieces that I didn't like after I finished them and actually published them, and I went like, oh no. No, I need to make this like disappear from the internet.
Yeah.
It happens.
It happens. But then sometimes I really don't like something and then the people seem to like it. So I'm like, oh, okay, good. I guess this is for you then, not for me.
Yeah, definitely. How do you start selling? Oh no, it's gone. It's gone. The
I
question.
guess that is a question. The answer is check out our stream from yesterday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How do you start selling at conventions and online or something? I can't find it.
Step 1, defeat COVID-19. Sorry, I didn't want to. Yeah, but that's the big elephant in the room for conventions. Just there's no way they're gonna start back up until something changes. I don't know what, but something. But conventions are great if they're happening. They're really, really nice.
They are fun. And I mean, in the end, if you want to go to a convention, then get a table at a convention and start selling. It's not that much of a difficult process, I guess.
Yeah.
Especially online as well.
Yeah, and what I would say is just keep an eye out for artists that you follow that go to conventions, and when they post their booth setup, take a screenshot or just like grab that photo and analyze it and see what they're doing and see what you can copy. Just like every day, all the same advice, just like do research basically, just like grab people's best practices and use them for yourself.
Jamila, please end COVID.
All right, I'm on it. No problem.
Do either of you ever lose interest in an artwork if you need to work on it multiple sittings? If so, what are your mindsets around that? Multiple sittings? I sit on my pieces for so many sittings.
Yeah, like 40 hours.
Yeah,
just, I don't know, find little sections and areas that keep your interest, I guess. Even if you're just like rendering a brick texture, try to be curious about it and really find joy in those little things. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to push through it.
Yeah.
Sounds dumb, but really, it's just like, yeah, get curious about the shapes of things, the surfaces of things, and just keep going.
Yeah, I think finding little points of interest for yourself in your piece is really important. Like something to look forward to. I actually make notes in my PSD files at the end of each painting session, and I put down like what I need to fix and what I need to work on next, and kind of prepare myself to do that. And so
that is a good idea. I like that. Yeah, I do that too sometimes. Sometimes I'm insulting myself, like, what did I think about when I did this? Like, why is that hand so large? What the hell?
So many times. Oh my god.
Yeah, I do need more time for those clouds and just kind of like winging it. But yeah, the main thing I tried with this was bringing in more contrast, a little bit more visual interest, couple of harder lines, couple of textural elements here on the ground, just basically like rounding the characters. And let's see what happened compared to the beginning. I mean, it's still going to be a little bit of an odd one out compared to these others, just because there's more detailed landscape in them, more elements and all that. But yeah, let's just like see what happened. This is the beginning. This is now. It just feels a little bit less flat, these surfaces. Just like that distribution of detail is what I try to balance out in this. Yeah.
And it seems a bit more evident that that is actually a beach or ocean, basically.
Yeah, that's also what I was going for.
At the beginning,
yeah.
it could have been like clouds as well.
It
was not that whatever the word, I don't know. Distinct. There it goes.
Yeah.
Distinct.
Yeah. So that is pretty much all I wanted to do today. Yeah, we managed to get everything done in 2 hours rather than 1.5. But we got to answer a lot of questions this time, which is nice. I am glad you all enjoyed that list I provided, and yeah, I'm going. Awesome. So I'm going to upload that on my website as well. The link is jamilaknopf.com/lightbox. I am going to add this to the video description after we end the stream. And yeah, to end this, I wanted to thank Lorena for the amazing help. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for the people who's provided their portfolio for me to look at it. Thank you for all the people watching and contributing and chatting in the chat. So yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you for supporting Jamila.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more from me, I have a class on schoolism that basically teaches this and much more. Everything I know about illustration is bundled up in there, so if you're interested, check that out. That would be great. Yeah, somebody asked, will this still be available after Lightbox ends? Yes, it will stay on my YouTube channel. All right, now I'm going to sign off. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful day.
Stay happy and healthy. Yay. As always.
Stay awesome. Bye-bye.